Well, of course, only George Bush had used this particular term. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to demonstrate today that the term is not only common, but it is an integral part of the overall program. It is crucial. Both the, what Orwell called the inner party members and the outer party members need these key words. Like sea change, which was demonstrated much earlier, the New World Order agenda is the order agenda, period. It is the mechanism that they must use. Now, it may be a facade, and my personal position is, once the game is over, if the New World Order wins, well, I think the name will change and their real titles will come to pass once again. Referring to the first tape, though, and our first works with American Peril, I want to point something out. We had some comments that were made, for instance, about mechanisms that supposedly did not exist. More than sufficient documentation was available at the time, one of the complaints being that, well, how can we show that there, for instance, is an MJTF or FinCEN or, well, United Nations forces in America, equipment, technology, resources? This just couldn't happen in our lifetime. Well, first of all, let me point out some basic problems with bureaucracy, is that it is constantly changing. That is a fact. You might recall that BATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, is now known as ATF. Why? Well, they like threes, first of all, I guess. It's just easier to remember. Click, click, click. But ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, falls in line with the concept of three letters, FBI, KGB. Oops, I'm sorry. The KGB is now the FSK, by the way. You have DEA, EPA. Well, there's a whole plethora of alphabet soup mechanisms. But you cannot argue that at one time the ATF was known as the BATF. Have there been changes in bureaucracy? Most assuredly and intentionally. There is a mutation, a progression towards a final agenda or a specific mission statement that has already been established in the past and which is being progressed towards. Now, we originally demonstrated the MJTF as a mechanism which was virtually across the nation. It was argued that it isn't. Well, right here before you, this particular document which we're going to present, which was received on March 28th of 1994 by Senator Wellborn's office from John Engler, Governor, of course, Department of State Police, and it gives, of course, the pertinent address. This particular document dated March 22nd, 1994, addressed to the Honorable Jack Wellborn, State Senator, 13th District, P.O. Box 30036, Lansing, Michigan, 48909. We won't worry about the rest of the digits. Dear Mr. Wellborn, thank you for your letter of March 10th, 1994. I'll save you some space here. We do have, 22 existing multi-jurisdictional task forces which predominantly investigate and, of course, target narcotics trafficking conspiracies. However, in the body of this work, it will also admit to the fact that there are special task forces and elements that are part of the MJTF throughout the state of Michigan. Ladies and gentlemen, this single sheet notes that, and again I'll point out, 22 multi-jurisdictional task force units in the state of Michigan alone. Isn't that fascinating? Well, it should point to and demonstrate that if there are 22 in Michigan, which is not the most populous state of the nation, how many MJTF police units are there in New York? How many in Los Angeles? Miami. What about Seattle, Texas, North and South Dakota? We should be able to get an overall survey, but if you'll recall, and one of the arguments made is that first there was absolute denial that the MJTF existed. Now there is a further extrapolation of the name, and we now know that there is, of course, also JTF. What have they done? Take one letter off, make it simpler. Remember, the alphabet soup mechanisms work in threes. So what we're seeing now is a reconfiguration of the title, and we're going to demonstrate also with many other works tonight that, well, they're just cropping up everywhere with information in their own media resources. Also remember that training is required, and a good portion of the information with regard to data on the MJTF, on FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and many of the others are now publicly available and have even been mentioned in the general media. Now, I might remind you that at first there was positive, absolute denial, and even amongst other media sources that they controlled, the New World Order crowd made an attempt to try and, of course, ridicule or, of course, make sport or fun of the people who were talking about these subjects. And yet, today, 1995-96, in the last 6 months to 1 year, we have seen virtually every element and mechanism of the original work American Peril come to pass. From the currency change to United Nations open exposure, both in the United States, Canada, and of course now globally, we're seeing the MJTF in your neighborhood, in your backyard. From Cleveland to Chicago, from New Orleans to Miami, from New York, yes, even to Los Angeles. The MJTF, or the JTF, Joint Task Force Mechanism, and many others are now being developed. Oh, and by the way, did I mention there are yet new combinations that have been created? Why? Well, there's another thing. Counterintelligence operations, ladies and gentlemen. We have accessed and demonstrated a window of history, if you will. This doesn't mean that things aren't changing. They must. Just as if you've ever been in the military, they will continue to alter the names, patches, insignia, and heraldry of military units to confound the enemy. So the New World Order crowd has to constantly be changing the battlefield for their own purposes, mostly to befuddle the common population and maintain a level of terror. Why do they do this? Well, obviously the New World Order crowd doesn't have superior numbers and doesn't necessarily even have superior technology. But what it does have is one heck of a propaganda arm. Both Mao Zedong, many of the ancient writings, and of course authors in China, but also in Europe and even in the United States, will explain to you in a military posture the very first weapon used is propaganda. And of course the objective is to convince your enemy that it is futile to resist, you will be absorbed. By doing this, a good portion or a percentage of the aggressor force you're facing can be neutralized. That is exactly what the purpose is behind the controlled media and why information has been denied to the American people. Now, is the JTF the only issue that we're concerned with? Well, I brought up the term New World Order. This is a military document. Actually, this is an official publication, Military Review, the Professional Journal of the United States Army, December 1992, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a puzzle. Well, you'll notice I'm circling, and you might look to, of course, the center, and you'll find the pivot of the clock. The center of the puzzle is the United Nations. But first, we must enter by the proper door. And so, on December 1992, the proper entrance point of the puzzle would be New World Order. This wasn't made up by the Patriot Movement. This document can be found in your library locally, along with many other documents that support the same view. And again, this is 1992. You'll now notice that most recently, and I think probably the best example is the tape that you're going to be watching here, a small excerpt of, with one of our representatives from the Marine Corps at Operation, well, we call it Nifty Nugget. In reality, the exercise was known as Cooperative Nugget. At this point in time, you're going to now hear from, I believe it's General Sheehan, who makes a point of explaining to everybody just exactly what these exercises are all about.
You who are here today are observing an absolutely historic event. The soldiers that you see before you represent not the past, but rather the future. It is through exercises such as this that truly we can create a new world order in which the militaries of the world can work in coordination and cooperation to build a better peace.
Well, thank you very much, General, for that, New World Order commentary. As we can demonstrate, ladies and gentlemen, we're not just seeing this in one part of the country. We are seeing this all over the nation and around the world. Both Mr. Aristide in Haiti, gentlemen across Europe right now are touting the New World Order left and right. There's a reason for this. After all, again, we have forced the New World Order's hand. We have slowed down the agenda here in America, and many people around the world are taking note. Now, New World Order is a key catchphrase, and of course, as you saw, the General's comments were being given at a particular event. What was it? Well, Cooperative Nugget 95, Partnership for Peace. Well, peace of what? Well, peace of Texas, peace of Pennsylvania, peace of Florida. I imagine a little piece of all republics and commonwealths of these United States. And that's why we've promoted the militia, well, for a reason. We see much more than just this. There have been actions of this type across the United States. This was just the first of many that were being given public attention to test the waters and see how stupid we really are. It might be noted, of course, ladies and gentlemen, this was purely a United Nations exercise. For those of you who do doubt that, well, there's ample examples of what was missing from the official releases of the Department of Defense. Several different tapes were done by DoD propaganda personnel, and